All right, let's keep going. So here we have, now we're moving into crustaceans. And so again, arthropod means jointed feet. So we see, these jointed body parts. This is an Alaskan king crab, which is like a delicacy. And you can see we can get a lot of meat from a crab like this. And then most people think that these are insects, that roly-polies are insects. And from the textbooks and stuff that I've studied, they are actually not insects. They are land crustaceans, which is kind of surprising. So they're little crustaceans that live on the land and are actually more related to things like crabs than they are to insects. Now, insects and crustaceans are under the category or within the phylum called arthropods, but a roly-poly or pillbug is actually a crustacean. It is not an insect. Okay, so here we have a Japanese spider crab, which are really big, obviously. So this gives you an idea how big they are. Some people might be a little scared of these. And here's a guy holding one, so obviously pretty enormous. These, I'm assuming, are the largest arthropods. I can't imagine there's anything bigger than this. And then we got some cool, like, shrimp. This one's really neat. Okay, now we get into, like, arachnids. So here we have, like, spiders and scorpions, and this is a tick. So these are all categorized into a group of organisms usually called arachnids. There's also another term for it that's not as well known, so we'll just go with arachnids. Here's a cool little spider that's doing kind of like a display to attract a mate, and just really interesting adaptations here, really cool colors, and just very unusual, and they do like a little dance and behavior. I think a lot of it is to show that they're not a threat when they try to mate. Okay, here is a sea spider, which is obviously pretty freaky, and if you've ever seen the Alien movies, it reminds me a lot of the creatures in the Alien movies. I'm sure if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Let's keep going. Okay, here we have a horseshoe crab, but it is actually not related to crabs. They are more close, so that name actually needs to be fixed, and it should be turned into a horseshoe spider, if anything, because they are actually more closely related to spiders, which we can kind of see underneath here, which might freak some people out. But because they came out of the water, people assumed, and obviously they might be crabs or something, but they are actually more closely related to spiders. Okay, and here we have organisms that are usually classified in a group called Uniramians, I think. And they have like multiple legs and segmented body parts. And so here we have a centipede, and over here is a millipede. And now I will tell my freaky centipede story. So, as I've mentioned in some of the lectures, my family lives in Kauai, and what they do is real estate in Kauai. They're have a real estate business, and in Kauai is actually there's a spot on Kauai that's actually considered the rainiest place on Earth, and we think this is why some tourists actually don't choose to go to Kauai, because they hear that and think it's going to be raining all the time, which is not necessarily accurate. It's like this one particular mountain. So anyways, there's a lot of rain, though. It's a rainforest almost everywhere in Kauai. And there's still people, sort of more like native Hawaiians that have been there for a long time, that have homes kind of up in the mountains and stuff that have been there for generations. And some of those places are a little run down from all the the rain, and haven't been taken care of, and rebuilt year after year. And so they've kind of weathered over time. And because my parents do real estate, they would go into the mountains and do, buy and sell homes and whatnot with different people, and they would hear different stories. And one of the stories they had has to do with centipedes like this, which in Kauai are poisonous. And the story goes like this: that in one of these kind of shacks up in the mountains that had been kind of worn down from rain for decades or whatever, there was a hive. So they live in hives sometimes, a hive of centipedes above the shower inside one of these shacks. And there was actually somebody in the shower taking a shower when it finally broke, probably from all the moisture, and the hive of centipedes actually collapsed on top of the person that was in the shower, which is, I'm sure, a nightmare for some people. And this person then was covered in centipedes, and they're poisonous too. So it was actually kind of this big thing where they had to go to the hospital and be treated for all these bites and stuff, and just whatever. So I guess it goes to, people need to take care of their homes, and just kind of a crazy story that my parents had. And actually, my stepmom has been bit by one. I think they were having like a dinner party or something, and she got bit. And she said it was far worse than a bee sting. So I guess if you go out there, be careful. I've run around. They live near a golf course, and I'll be out there in bare feet, just kind of walking around on the property. And I always worry I'm going to get bit, but so far I haven't been. But I don't know. Maybe one of you out there has been nailed by one of these centipedes, which I guess hurts pretty bad. Okay, then we got some cool praying mantises. So here's some really neat ones, and these ones actually appear to have some mimicry camouflage going on, which we learned about in evolution, where these almost kind of look like eyes that might confuse like a predator. So this is like a really, really advanced praying mantis. Here's another kind of weird mantis that looks like leaves. So praying mantises have been around for a long time, and they have co-evolved with some plants, like this one as well, to hide and look like the plants they're living on. Here's another weird one. Here's just some cool praying mantises. Kind of very alien looking. And, obviously their heads are very alien-like. Praying mantises are particularly weird. Here's one kind of doing like the Karate Kid stance, if you know what I'm talking about there. And probably defending itself. Probably it was in the street and somebody wanted to take a picture, and this is kind of how it's trying to make itself look big, to try to scare the person away. Okay, and then we talked about how there are 25% of all species on Earth are beetles. So of course we got to talk about beetles. So here's some interesting beetles here. These ones are pretty common. You've probably seen ones like these. I've seen them all over California, especially where I was growing up in Northern California. But pretty sure they're in like the Santa Monica Mountains as well. Here's just some other interesting looking beetles to check out. Here's a bunch of little beetle babies that have just been born, and what they'll do is they'll like eat their little eggshells as nutrients, so that right when they're born they have food. There's also a lot of interesting grasshoppers in the world. People kind of take grasshoppers for granted as kind of plain and brownish plain color. But we've got some really interesting, colorful grasshoppers, so I thought I would throw some pictures in of those. Here's some more. So, again, really amazing colors. Okay. Again, I'm caught off guard by some of my own pictures because I haven't seen them for like a year. But this is a giant weta, which we actually learned about in a movie we watched at the beginning of the evolution unit, and it talked about how they can be frozen solid, and then when the ice thaws, they can come back to life. And that was one of the questions in the movie worksheet, and it said, explain how wetas can freeze without dying, and I'm pretty sure this is the right animal at least. It said that the ice forms in between their cells. So their cells have evolved to keep the ice out. And the ice forms between them. And they're really big, but they're harmless. And I guess this guy's trying to show that. Okay, then we got other mimicry insects like stick bugs. This is a cool stick bug. Bugs that look like have mimicked, through coevolution, have mimicked leaves. This is a giant hornet. It might be one of those murder hornets they're calling them. I'm guessing it's at least very similar. I've actually had this picture in the slideshow for years before the murder hornets or whatever showed up here. They're called murder hornets because they will destroy beehives and take over beehives and kill a bunch of bees. But this is interesting. Bees can fight back in a weird way. So probably going to put a question on this on the style assessment, so pay attention. What the bees can do is they like swarm it, but they don't bite it. What they do is they start vibrating their bodies, and they increase, and they literally cover and surround the hornet, and they'll vibrate their wings and their bodies, which actually creates friction, which creates heat, and then that heat actually destroys the hornet. And that's the only way they can defend themselves, as far as I know. Otherwise, they can't just chew it up or something like that. They have to use this like heat attack as a group. But it kind of shows how smart the bees are and that they figured that out. And it's good that they're able to defend themselves because we need our bees and our pollinators. And it is unfortunate that these hornets have shown up in the United States in the last few weeks. Here's just a fly, and close-up shows all the lenses that they have on their eyes, which is kind of interesting. And this is a fly. This is actually a plant that I have in my bathroom. Normally we would do a plant lab where students bring in plant samples, and sometimes the kids leave their samples behind and don't take them with them. So this is a plant that I've had for probably like 8 or 9 years that a kid brought to summer school to do the same lab. And one day, this really cool-looking fly was on my plant, and I took this picture, and it part of why I think it's cool, it's got the big eyes and everything. It has these dark hairs on it, but it also had this really bright green, sort of emerald-looking exoskeleton. So, strangely enough, it's kind of a pretty fly. Here's just kind of a weird, like, water bug. Just, I don't know, another picture to check out. Alright, so we're going to finish with ecology. So let's go over that. So invertebrate animals can be detritivores. I mentioned a number of animals, sea cucumbers, crustaceans, insects, lots of different detritivores, basically things that will eat dead stuff and poop and get rid of that stuff, which is almost like a decomposer, but not quite. Our main pollinators on Earth are insects, and which are a type of invertebrate. So obviously that's really important and is keeping our flowering plants, and which basically create all our fruit. So we need our pollinators, and we need to protect our pollinators from pesticides and pollution, as well as from those murder hornets, they're calling. Okay, they're a big part of our food web. Plankton in the ocean is made of the larvae of a lot of invertebrates, which is really important. And chances are some of you have eaten invertebrates, or maybe all of you have. So if you've ever eaten crab or lobster or shrimp, escargot, you can get sea urchin in sushi restaurants, octopus, all sorts of stuff. So chances are most of you have eaten some kind of invertebrate animal. All types of symbiosis, parasitism, mutualism, commensalism, all types. Some, like we talked about, tapeworms can be pretty bad. Parasites, so there's a lot of parasites, but also we have mutualism taking place. We can also use invertebrates to monitor the biosphere. So the health of the invertebrate animals helps indicate the health of an ecosystem. So for instance, if a lot of invertebrate animals start dying, it usually is an indication that something's going on. And then scientists can react and go, okay, why are all these invertebrates dying? And often it's a result of pollution, and nowadays we're finding it's connected to global warming too. But if there's some kind of subtle water pollution that maybe we don't even sense, but the invertebrates are dying, maybe we can do some studies and figure it out. And so we can kind of use the health of our invertebrate animals as a way to measure and gauge the health of our biosphere and our ecosystems. And so as long as our invertebrates are thriving and doing well, that's a really good sign, whether that's insects or coral or mollusks or crustaceans. These all can be indicator species of something going wrong in the biosphere and in the ecosystem, so we need to monitor them so that we can respond quickly and hopefully clean that pollution and take care of those problems that are taking place. And that's it for invertebrate animals. So here we see a weird moth. This is kind of just finishing off with this kind of odd, kind of cool looking moth creature. Alright, all we have is one more set of notes left, which are vertebrate animals. And